wondered what would happen if Mortal Kombat met Predator? Well, you might have Jiu-Jitsu. This one is directed and co-written by Dimitri Logothetis, who also was the man behind the kickboxing reinvention, which actually starred Alain Moussi, who also is the main character of this one, Jake. But you've actually got a pretty good cast here. Most famously, you've got Nicolas Cage as the kind of like the mentor type role, a role that was actually originally made for Bruce Willis, but he couldn't make it due to scheduling conflicts. So we have Nicolas Cage here, who I actually think is better suited for the role. But you've also got appearances from Frank Grillo, Tony Jaa, Rick Yoon, and one of the girls from 100, whose name I'm not going to pronounce because it's really long, but I kind of recognised her as well. And what's the story? So it's a somewhat of a silly, convoluted B-movie story, if we're being completely honest. So we have this alien that comes to Earth every 6 years on the back of this comet that kind of passes, and it comes through this portal, and it's essentially the alien that has introduced Jiu-Jitsu to the world, and it simply wants to fight 9 individuals to test its skill. We don't really know much about the motivations, to be honest with you. We just know it wants to fight 9 humans, and so every 6 years we get a group of these kind of selected few who have to fight this creature to the death. Well, the added wrinkle of this one is our main character Jake, played by Alain Moussi, has lost his memory, and he is being pursued by the US military, who also is taking an interest in what's going on. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So let's talk about the good stuff. What works here? So the movie reportedly had a budget of around 25 million. So it's a relatively, what we class as really a medium budget film here. And I suspect a lot of that went on cast because, you know, it has, you know, a decent amount of recognisable faces here. And they're not just cameos, you know, you see a lot of these sort of stars of, you know, of movies that came out of, you know, of yesteryear in the 80s, and they'll pop up in these low budget affairs for a scene or two. But this is a legitimate supporting role here for Nicolas Cage, who was apparently did 5 days of shooting, which doesn't sound like much, but I think they obviously they got the most out of him when he was there. And, you know, he's playing this kind of like this crazy mental guy, which is right up Nicolas Cage's street, and is much better suited to him than Bruce Willis, who the role was originally kind of written for. Although there is no freak out scene, you may be disappointed to know if you're a Nicolas Cage fan. He does not freak out in this movie. Now, Alain Moussi is an accomplished martial artist. You know, he obviously was in the kickboxer movies, and he's done, you know, some other kind of action movies before. And I can't take it away from him. He is a very skilled martial artist, and that is on display in this movie as well. As there is a great many fights. In fact, the second half of the movie is more or less just one fight after another. And you know, the martial arts here is fantastic. It's obviously very well choreographed. I have to say, I do think Alain is lacking a little bit of charisma, to be honest with you. He does kind of seem not particularly interesting compared to some of his co-stars, even kind of like, I would say, Frank Grillo's character is the kind of the more sort of grizzled, maybe veteran type character. Alain just doesn't quite have the gravitas, I feel, in kind of acting here, but certainly makes up for it in regards to some of the kind of the action sequences, which are very good. And obviously you've got Tony Jaa here, who has an extended action sequence towards the beginning of the movie as well, which is obviously very kind of spectacular, as you'd probably imagine. But put a pin in that, because I do have some issues with it. I actually quite like the design of the alien here. It kind of looks pretty cool. It's not a direct rip-off of at least the look of the Predator alien, because this movie is very much a Predator clone. Even down to kind of like heat vision, kind of some of the sound effects, things like this, the kind of like the hiss of the you know, the vents that come out and things like that. But I have to say, at least the kind of the costume is a little different, you know. It kind of looks like its own thing, kind of looks more like a space marine sort of style. I quite like the costume, to be honest with you, and it kind of looked, you know, functional as well as kind of looking quite good, which I appreciated the design there. I thought that was kind of quite good. And obviously, it's actually quite a... the director here takes some chances in regard to some of his camera work. And I felt some of it worked, some of the camera work is a little inventive. There are certain things where it feels like he's maybe kind of doing it for the sake of doing, oh, let's be kind of crazy and do some kind of crazy things with the camera and go into first person for a couple of times and things like this. And I think some of it worked and some of it didn't. A little bit of a mixed bag, but at least we have an attempt here to kind of have a little bit of flair in regards to some directorial choices here. The movie was filmed in Cyprus, and you know it takes advantage of some kind of lush backgrounds and you know some nice wide-angle shots. Kind of see the kind of like the scenery, and we kind of look like we're out in the kind of like the isolated locations and things like this. So that was all pretty good. So let's talk about maybe what doesn't work. Okay, to be honest with you, despite the fact this is a relatively, you know, has a reasonable budget, it is pure. I mean, it's pure B-movie hokum. I mean, I watch a lot of B-movies, a lot of low-budget movies, some of which are, the budget is maybe just a few $1,000s, and they have a kind of, this has a similar plot to these sort of films. It's just like not sophisticated at all in any type of way in regards to storytelling. I mean, the plot gives us such thin characters. I mean, we don't know where these, like, we have our kind of hero characters. We don't know anything about them. We don't know where they've come from, how they got selected. Nothing. We are given nothing. Nicolas, I mean, the movie doesn't really explain what's kind of going on until fairly towards, you know, at least the end of the second act of the movie. And I don't know if it's quite as gripping to keep people engaged in the story, to kind of really really know what's going on. You're thinking, okay, what, you know, this Jake character, you know, we don't know his relationships with this random group of people, with Nicolas Cage's character, who seems to be somewhat affiliated with them, but seems to be a bit of an outsider. We don't really know what the army's doing there. We don't really know why Jake is fighting the army, since they don't appear to be trying to kind of harm him in any particular way. And there's this movie just oh, don't worry about action, don't worry about plot. It's very much rushing to kind of get to the action set pieces. And then I mentioned the scene with Tony Jaa at the beginning of the movie. We have a scene that involves Tony Jaa and Elaine Moussaï and versus the army. And this is the US Army, but they seem to be armed with little more than knives, the majority of them. And it just seems crazy that people aren't using guns, or they don't seem to be armed, and they are attacking people with knives and armed, you know, and kind of like fist combat and stuff like that. We get a couple of people shooting at him, but again, I have an issue with that, but the vast majority of these soldiers don't seem to be armed with weapons, as in firearms. These aren't your kind of like your ragtag mercenaries who only have like 5 guns between the few, you know, all of them. It's just meant to be the US Army. They're all going to have guns. And it just seems crazy that is just like, we just want to have some fist fights, and we're just going to ignore the fact that any of these soldiers don't have weapons. And the ones that do can't seem to hit the side of a bus. Which leads me on to the visual effects. And we're talking about the VFX rather than the practical here. I have to say, some of the VFX look really cheap and really rushed. It actually, to be honest with you, looks like quickly done After Effects. For example, things like muzzle flashes, you know, when bullets are hitting the walls of dust, even the CGI blood. There are instances where you'll see muzzle flashes and it doesn't line up with the kind of the barrel of the gun and things like this. So CGI explosions, all this kind of stuff, and it looks really cheap. And again, I make the comparison to a lot lower budget films. We see this kind of thing on films that have, let's say, less than $1 million budget, and I can kind of excuse it in that. But for a $25 million budget, I can't really excuse it. It has enough money to have better, you know, visual effects. It's obvious the money's gone to the talent, I feel. And okay, maybe did we need Frank Grillo in this if we're going to have Nicolas Cage and Tony Jaa? Probably not. Maybe put the money, and I like Frank Grillo, but I'm just giving you the point that I think the money could have been more evenly spread to kind of to make the film just better. I mean, the script as well is as I say, it's just paper thin. It's paper thin, and I have to be honest with you. I didn't really understand the rules of this particular contest, because in some instances our kind of hero characters attack the alien en masse, and in other times they just seem to be waiting for people to have like a one-on-one fight without kind of getting involved. And I think, and then there's a bit of exposition where someone says, "Oh, he'll kill everyone if kind of like other people get involved," and stuff like that. But other people do get involved, and he kind of like, I don't know how you can kind of say, "Oh, the alien's going to do this," when he's obviously not human and not communicating it with anyone. And I don't understand why sometimes our kind of like warriors attack en masse and sometimes they attack one at a time. It doesn't make sense. And again, the movie is just not interested in kind of having logic. It just wants to get to the next kind of fight scene and aping those conflicts that we would have seen in things like Predator, where it is attacking one-on-one, and that's kind of the movie that it's kind of trying to emulate. And there's some dialogue here that says, "Oh, this alien's mostly interested in Jake, who's played by Alain Moussai." Why? I mean, we learn that he actually runs away from the alien, and there's no reason why he feels that this Jake character is the biggest threat. I mean, he's the main character, and that is why, because he's the kind of like the main character in the story. But in the context of the reality of this universe, it doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? The movie just is complete. Doesn't worry about logic. It just forget about it, and it just unfortunately it's so unsophisticated. It could have been a decent Predator clone, to be honest with you, but instead I find myself being more critical of this one because I say it has the finance behind it to have been a better film, and I just don't feel it really has spent the money in the right places to me. And I've got to be honest with you, I feel it maybe needed to have more producers who would sort of kind of like say to the director, who is also the co-writer, maybe we should do this. Have a bit more pushback, because I feel this is more or less a one-man show. And that's what a producer is supposed to do. It's kind of like why you have the opposition in politics, to kind of keep the government in line and almost and hold them to account, and that's the producer's job. And I see in a few films it doesn't seem to happen. They're just full of yes men, and that's when things fall down, because famously that's kind of what happened with George Lucas. Anyway, I'm going off topic a little bit here, but the movie, I have to say, is a little bit too silly and a little bit too simplistic to really max out the enjoyment. But let me ask you this. If you really enjoyed Mortal Kombat Annihilation, you'll love this film, because that's kind of the level that it's at. It's just lots of kind of fights, lots of kind of like funny costumes and kind of a hokum science fiction concepts, dodgy CGI, and lots of fight scenes. And the fight scenes are well done, I will say that. The hand-to-hand ones, at least. The gun battles. I mean, the army just disappears as well halfway through this movie. I have to be honest with you. I think this movie, for me at least, was a little disappointing. I think I was expecting more from it. I knew it was going to be a B movie, but I just didn't expect the story to just be so trite and so silly. That's what it is. It's silly. I enjoyed some of the trappings, but it's just it was just too ridiculous and too hadn't been thought out enough. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. I thought it was quite a low bar, to be honest with you. And I feel movies like Kickboxer, which maybe is a little, has its foot more in a little bit of reality, is maybe the direction that this team should go in. I think the kind of the fantastical stuff needs more thought behind it, to be honest with you, because it is just super B. This is more B movie than a lot of low budget B movies. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.